Welcome to The Point. My name is John Fugelsang. I'm very pleased to be here as your guest host today. We have three really great points on the show this week. One is a video from Salon.com writer Gary Kamiya about Jesus and the GOP. Then comedian Dave Holmes weighs in on LGBT voters and Obama. Is Obama's record on gay rights enough to make the LGBT community single-issue voters? And finally, we will weigh in on Whitney Houston's tragic death, what it says about us as a culture, our addiction to watching addicts on TV for entertainment, and the growing peril of pharmaceutical drugs. But first, as I said in the beginning, my name is John Fugelsang. I'm a political comedian, an actor, and a writer, and I'm the child of two ex-clergy. I come from an abnormally Christian background, an abnormally Catholic background. We used to have open casket reunions. My mother is an ex-nun, and my father is an ex-Franciscan brother. So I grew up admiring Jesus the way anybody admires mom's first husband. But I've come to view Jesus in much the way I've come to view Elvis. I love the guy. The fan clubs scare me. And I'm glad we're talking about Jesus and the GOP candidates today because we hear them all talking about Jesus all the time. They invoke his name incessantly. He's like a mascot holding pom-poms on the sidelines. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could find a way to get Jesus of Nazareth to come back and run for president on the GOP ticket? They can't pick a front runner anyway. So wouldn't the GOP love to get behind a guy who was a peaceful, radical, nonviolent revolutionary who hung around with lepers, hookers, and criminals, who never spoke English, was not an American citizen, a man who was anti-capitalism, anti-wealth, anti-public prayer, yes he was, Matthew 6:5, anti-death penalty, but never once remotely anti-gay, didn't mention abortion, didn't mention premarital sex, a man who never justified torture, who never called the poor lazy, who never asked a leper for a co-pay, who never fought for tax cuts for the wealthiest Nazarenes, and was a long-haired, brown-skinned, that's in Revelations, homeless Middle Eastern Jew. Of course, that's only if you believe what's actually in the Bible. So I'm very excited about today's panel because joining me, we have USC Professor of Media and Religion, Diane Winston. Welcome.
Hi.
Happy to be joined by Rabbi Lisa Edwards of the Beth Chayim Chadashim, which is the world's first synagogue founded by gays and lesbians. And my old pal, comedian and actor Paul Gilmartin, who is the longtime host of the Mental Illness Happy Hour. Welcome. And thank you all for coming on The Point today as I drag this whole enterprise down to my own base level. Let's start with our first point of the day. And this point, as I said, well, this comes from our friends over at Salon. This is Gary Kamiya talking about what I talked about, Jesus and the GOP. He phrases it much better than I ever could.
Hi, I'm Gary Kamiya. I'm a writer for Salon.com, and this is my point. This has been the most devout group of candidates in the Republican presidential primaries in history. Watching this has been an exercise in them trying to out-Christian each other. Rick Santorum has all but called for a theocracy, saying that God's law should take precedence over civil law. Newt Gingrich has repeatedly attacked President Obama's so-called war on religion, and there's only one problem with this highly devout group of candidates. Everything we know about Jesus of Nazareth indicates he would have been appalled by the whole pack of them. The GOP has been pursuing what has been known as a Southern strategy ever since Richard Nixon employed it. And it's an appeal to racial resentment and a demonization of undeserving poor people, especially black people. This is why Newt Gingrich has repeatedly called President Obama the food stamp president, and why Mitt Romney went out of his way to say he was not concerned about the very poor. This is an attempt to appeal to the GOP's race-resentful base. What we know about Jesus, everything we know about Jesus, is that this would have been anathema to him. He himself was a member of the very poor. He and his disciples traveled destitute around Palestine, sleeping in wherever house would take them, and repeatedly in the Gospels, Jesus instructs his followers that they must be concerned not just about the poor, but about the very poor. There are actually two words in Greek for poor and very poor, and he uses the word that means very poor. And repeatedly in the Gospels, especially in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus makes it absolutely clear that compassion and concern for the very lowest members of society is an absolute necessity for those that would believe in him. Well, there is a great gulf fixed between the mean-spirited, cold-hearted pronouncements of the GOP candidates who claim to be devout Christians and the actual practices and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. That's my point. I'm Gary Kamiya from Salon.com. You can find my writings on that website. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for dressing up for your video, too. So here's the question. I don't want to go to you for this, Professor. I happen to agree with everything Gary just said, and I do think that Jesus Christ as a character is the greatest liberal in the history of religion or literature. I wouldn't say that makes him a Democrat by any means, but do you agree that the GOP presidential candidates are anything but Christ-like in their positions on issues of poverty and race?
You know, your monologue and Gary's point make perfect sense to me. So my question is not, or my issue is not whether or not the GOP is Christ-like, because obviously they're not, is what are we going to do about it? And as a professor of journalism, I'd say the problem is the news media. We have to stop parroting these people who say they're Christian. I mean, why take them at face value? How about us reading the Bible and us saying to people, well, where does it say that in the Bible? Or doesn't Jesus say in Matthew 25, like, take care of the poor? I mean, just because someone says it, we don't have to quote it.
I couldn't agree more, and I do think the culprit here, and tell me if you all disagree, is the so-called liberal media that's so afraid of asking any tough questions for fear of being unbalanced.
Right.
You know,
is it that, or is it also that they're afraid they're going to lose access?
Well, that's always a thing. I mean, the media is supposed to be a watchdog, but instead they have to become cheerleaders if they want to get those good interview gets. But I think we saw a very interesting moment in the 2008 presidential campaign when Anderson Cooper, in a GOP debate, came right out and said to Mike Huckabee, where do you get off supporting the death penalty when Jesus was so clearly against it? And Mike Huckabee had a very cute, pithy line saying Jesus was too smart to ever run for office. And the crowd cheered and everyone laughed, and Cooper asked no follow-up questions. I'm not saying if you should cheat on people, but if you're dating Anderson Cooper, at least you know the guy doesn't ask too many tough follow-up questions. So he's a good guy, much respect. But is this the case? I mean, Rabbi, you seem to know a thing or two about religion. Does it seem to you when you watch TV that all we see are right-wingers and atheists?
It does feel like that quite often. They seem to get a lot of airtime. But I think it is a problem because there are so many much more liberal-leaning religious people in the world and in the country today who aren't getting a lot of voice time. But I agree with Professor Winston that the journalists themselves, I would love to see much more difficult follow-ups to the questions and the comments that are being stated. I really want to know what the religious views of our candidates are. I believe in separation of religion and state, but I want to know because I want to use that to help choose our candidates.
Even if they don't bring it up themselves, you'd like to know that?
Yes, because I want to know how they will keep a separation of religion and state if they are in office. I want to know how they'll protect it. I think there's no question that there's been so many politicians who are religious.
Of course.
Right.
And at the same time, I would agree that we'd also want to know what it is in their spirituality that guides them as legislators. You know, that was the famous line that JFK had to walk, where he's going to say, I'm not going to kiss the ring of the Vatican, but I am going to let my faith guide my principles as a leader. And I think most people, conservatives and liberals alike at the time, would have agreed he walked that line pretty well. Paul, what do you think? What is the proper role for religion in the public sphere? Would you prefer this be the sort of thing that candidates don't talk about at all, or is that just utopian?
I believe it should be a personal thing, and the way you express your spirituality is in the way you legislate and the compassion that you show as a legislator. I think your actions should speak for themselves, and somebody should be able to look at your record and say, wow, that person's in line with the teachings of Buddha or Jesus or whatever. I think there's just too much talk and there's not enough action.
Yeah, I would agree. And I saw a lot of this in the Rick Santorum birth control controversy. Now, I'm of the opinion that you really can't use scripture to say birth control is wrong. I think the story of Onan is really a story about not following the commander-in-chief's orders about keeping the tribe's numbers up as opposed to wearing a Jimmy hat. I think that's how Paul phrased it. So, to me, I'm more concerned about the fact that the last two popes, John Paul II and Benedict, were both 100% against the Iraq War. So I want to hear Rick Santorum talking about Bush and Cheney's war on religion. I mean, I don't really think there's much of a chance of that happening, but when you look at the distance between what Christ said, what these guys believe, and the Catholic Church is a great example. The current pope says that all nations have a right to provide health care to their poorest citizens. They are not really big on hating illegal immigrants. The U.S. Council of Catholic Bishops is completely opposed to Arizona's immigration law. But again, I hear this coming from the clergy who don't get airtime. I don't hear it coming from the media.
Well, I have the feeling that the media is tremendously conservative and status quo in nature, and that's a real truth that no one wants to say. The media is not liberal. I think the conservatives have done a great job of making media heads fear that they're liberal and fear for their base, but really, most media are owned by hedge funds, by multinational corporations. I mean, these are not liberal people. These are people who want to keep things the way they are.
They don't want to do an expose on General Electric when they have to see or the general electorate when they have to see that person on a joint board meeting the following Monday. And as media gets more and more consolidated, it becomes more and more uncomfortable for those people to blow the whistle on the person that they're going to see at a cocktail party.
Yeah,
and I
you're
think
right.
it's bread and circuses. I mean, conflict, sensationalism keeps people busy. It has them talking, and instead of grappling with real issues and smart solutions, we're thinking who's screwing who and who's ODing and who's saying something crazy.
Of course.
If you look at the history of the damage that Goldman Sachs has wrought on this country in the last 80 years, it's more than Al Qaeda could dream of.
Absolutely.
I mean, if we want to eavesdrop, let's eavesdrop on the Hamptons.
Well, and I think Jesus would kind of agree with you. I mean, Jesus' whole life is a guy who stands up to the conservative authority of his day, be it the religious authorities who are drunk on their own eminence, the wealthy, the capitalists he drove out of the temple, which was because they were charging too high of an interest rate on poor people, let's not forget, filthy socialist, and the European empire that was recklessly trying to colonize the Middle East by spreading its armies too thin, hint, hint. Time and time again we see this. Rabbi, do you think that because the media is biased towards ratings, and they're not going to ask these questions, do you think that it's a safe camouflage for candidates to wrap themselves up in their faith, knowing that it insulates them from any charges of bigotry?
Well, do you think it does insulate them? I mean, we're watching them. We have yet to see a front runner, really.
Yeah.
It's anybody's guess who's going to end up being the candidate. Surely some of the comments that they're making about their own religion are pulling them down.
But not with their own base. I mean, no one's going to come out and call them on it. We're not going to hear it at a GOP debate, and you're not going to hear it from the corporate media.
But I think most people are basically sensible, and Santorum has been getting grief from crowds about his stance on gays. So, and even some of his stance on women. So I think most American people aren't buying into this and aren't taking it. I mean, the media is reporting a really thin slice.
I'd like to read a quote from Deuteronomy. If there is among you anyone in need, a member of your community in any of your towns within the land that the Lord your God is giving you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward your needy neighbor. You should rather open your hand, willingly lending enough to meet the need, whatever it may be. Now, Rabbi, that sounds like a clear case that the rich pay too much in taxes and need to have their tax rate lowered. Am I correct?
You're right.
And the poor are lazy. Well, I want to wrap it up, this segment of the point really quickly. Newt Gingrich is fascinating to me for many reasons, because I'm a comedian. Yeah. But does his candidacy really prove that it doesn't matter what your ideology is, just the label you slap on yourself?
Absolutely. To me, he's really just a mobile Mr. Potter.
A mobile Mr. Potter?
Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life, the guy in the
You're a warped, frustrated young man, Paul Gilmartin. What do you say? Well, it is true, and I'll take an honest sitter over a pious hypocrite any day.
But you have to realize that according to some Christians, the fact that he's, confessed, that he said he's sorry, that he's made amends, I mean, that gives him street cred among some people.
Sure, among people who worship Jesus as a god, because that's a lot easier than following his teachings.
Yeah.
Guess guest host for the win. Well, I thank you all. This is an issue that's very close to my heart, obviously because of my childhood, and also because, you know, it was a curious campaign when we saw Herman Cain and Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich and Michelle Bachmann and Rick Perry all come out and say that they're running because God told them to. And I think the obvious answer to this is, why would God tell them all? Because God loves us and wants us to laugh. We'll be right back with yet another point here with this wonderful panel. Coming up next on The Point. Welcome back to The Point. I am John Fugelsang, your guest host for this episode. Coming up, a very exciting event here. We're going to have a neo-pagan ritual where we baptize dead Mormons into our satanic cult and then gay marry them with other dead Mormons because we feel that's the moral thing to do. But first, here's a video from comedian Dave Holmes.
Hey there, folks. I'm Dave Holmes. I know I looked like I'm in the gay bar from the Al Pacino movie Cruising, but I'm not. I'm at Cobb's Comedy Club getting ready to do a show. Thank you for having me on. My point is that a vote for a Republican president this year would be disastrous for gay rights. They are promising all kinds of bad things that they can't deliver. A federal marriage amendment, the unrepeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. If you're Rick Santorum or Michelle Bachmann, you are promising to just basically eradicate gay people off the face of the planet. Now, these are not things they're going to be able to do. If one of these people gets lucky enough to be elected, there's no way in the world they're going to be able to reverse what's happened. But what it will mean is that those promises are things that Americans take seriously and want to see enacted. They've sown some hate this year and last year, and if one of them wins, that means those seeds have sprouted. So don't vote for them, please. It would be an absolute disaster. Even though our daily lives might not change that much, it would be a long-term disaster. So we've got an ally who's not quite as fierce as we thought he was going to be at first, President Obama, but he's at least an ally. So let's keep him around, let's ride him, let's make sure he's keeping his promises, but let's keep him in the White House. Thanks for having me on for more of my insights. They're usually a little more articulate. Please stop by daveholmes.tv.
Thank you very much, Dave. And by the way, I performed at Cobb's Comedy Club. It's not quite as classy as the backroom scene in Cruising. So, Rabbi Lisa, I'd like to go to you with this one because Dave does raise a really interesting point. And we talk a lot about single-issue voters, but usually it's in the case of abortion or it's in the case of rich people who don't want to pay higher taxes. But is it your sense from the LGBT community that it's imperative to re-elect the president on the issue of gay and lesbian rights alone?
Well, I think nothing's alone here.
Right.
There's not going to be just one issue that we're going to have to deal with. But it is certainly painful for those of us who have been the victims of people who are seeking to either reverse laws that have been passed or to make sure that laws don't get passed in order to give us civil rights. Right. It's difficult to listen to that, those promises being made in the GOP. I do think that Obama is a friend to the LGBT community, and he's been showing that through the years now, with a number of ways in which he has been supportive of the community, and I think will continue to do, as cautious as he's being about some things.
I agree. I'd like to ask all three of you, is the homophobia of these candidates as bad as it seems, or
yes.
is it something they're using just to get votes? I've been of the opinion for a long time that the GOP doesn't really care about abortion. They know they can use it to raise money. And abortion, gay marriage, illegal immigration are three things they don't ever want to end because they're their top three biggest fundraisers. Now, under George Bush, for 6 years, the Republican Party controlled the White House, the House, and the Senate. We didn't hear anything about federal amendments to the Constitution banning gay marriage, none of it. But when it's an election year, then it comes up.
It's like this big ball of fear they pull out of the trunk when they need to, and they just dangle it, the red meat issues.
I don't believe George W. Bush was a homophobe, but I believe that he used guys like Karl Rove who exploited the homophobia of the base to win elections.
Well, wasn't Cheney's daughter isn't Cheney's daughter a lesbian?
Indeed, and so on the issue of marriage equality, we can say Dick Cheney is to the left of Barack Obama.
Right. Right. I agree with you. I think that there are certain points that the Republican Party knows will score them votes, or they think will score them votes, and so they go after them rather than discuss substantive issues. And the gay issue is one of them. I do believe that there are conservative Christians, and I have interviewed them, who truly believe that this is not what God wants. But I don't think these...
And yet God seems to keep manufacturing them year-round all across the globe.
Well, I'm not saying that they're correct or they know God's wishes, but this is how they interpret things. But I do think a lot of the politicians, especially those people who have been out and about, know people who are gay. They work with people who are gay. They have friends who have children who are gay. I mean, they're not idiots.
Exactly.
Well, they're...
Well, but in a way, it brings up sort of the difference between racism as an institutionalized bigotry and just garden variety hatred. You know, I mean, there may be people who have no hatred towards their gay and lesbian brothers and sisters in their hearts, but because of how they were raised, they just want to keep things the way they are and not allow marriage equality. That to me is institutionalized bigotry. There doesn't need to be any hate.
As Dave said in his point, seeds of hate are getting planted. So I do think that they are using those as seeds to plant and to promote their own.
But I don't think those seeds are falling on fertile ground, because we know from looking at polls that more and more young people do not consider this to be an issue. And probably in 25 years, no one's going to care.
They're
it's a
dinosaurs,
loser.
and every year they become less and less relevant.
But it
That's the good
still
news.
helps with fundraising, because seniors write checks to candidates. And look,
true.
I know gay Republicans, and I respect gay Republicans the way I respect cows who support Burger King, but they all come out and say the same thing. I'm not into groupthink. I'm voting my pocketbook, and I want my tax cut because I'm pro-growth, blah, blah, blah. While that's vulgar and stupid, I do think that they have a fair point in that it's not groupthink, and our gay and lesbian population is very diverse. But it seems to me, I don't think it really marginalizes the gay community to be single-issue voters when it comes to their own future.
You don't think it marginalizes them?
No, I don't think it does at all. Like, we talk about single-issue voting, like abortion, and we all have that relative who'll vote just based on partial birth abortion one way every time. They don't care about where the guy stands on the economy or social, just this one issue. You know, Dave's talking about the fact that anybody in the LGBT community has to vote for Obama. I think he ignores the fact that there are greedy bastard gay people who wouldn't mind seeing Willard Romney in the White House.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But
What do you say, Rabbi?
But he's also, I mean, are any of us going to vote for hate and try to make that the issue? I think, you know, when he's asking who are we voting for and who's being more protective of communities, of the larger community, I think that there's no question from what we've seen so far and what we've heard so far.
Well, do you guys agree with Dave's argument that it's not even the issues, but the message that a GOP win in the presidency could send to all of America, especially teenage gay and lesbian citizens?
I do think it's dangerous even in the campaign, even if they don't end up in the White House. I mean, again, it is those seeds.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Well, just that Professor Winston was saying, the seeds aren't falling on fertile ground, and we can hope that's true, and it does seem to be true, at least in those age, the polls that are divided by age, that things are changing. But there's still a risk, and even just that language is out there, and that it's even still an issue is such. Is heartbreaking.
Yeah. And what it does to young kids that are gay and are struggling with their identity, it sends a terrible message to them. And but I think the Republicans cynically know if they get the White House, it's not an issue they're going to be able to get any traction on.
They're going to drop it right away.
Drop it right away because they know they're not going to get anything passed.
Yeah.
They know their numbers are dying every single day. I think the danger of a Republican getting into the White House is we're going to start a third world war with Iran. I think that is.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you, and it comes back to the Bible again, because you can look in the Bible. There's a great game of telephone tag told throughout centuries as the books were written, and Jesus said, "Love your enemies." Santorum heard, nuke Iran.
Right.
But I do think that we are looking at an area where even if a candidate has no hatred in their heart and just uses homophobia to get votes and has no intention of undoing marriage equality laws once they're in the White House, the damage is done.
Yeah.
They played to hate, and the hate worked.
Yeah.
But I'm a contrarian perhaps, but what you said is so correct. No one's going to really legislate against gays, I don't think. I don't think things are going to necessarily be rolled back. On the other hand, poor people and people of color and people who are disenfranchised economically, things really will be bad for them.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
Yeah, exactly. And they're voting against their own self-interest in many cases.
Right.
There are still many things that need to be changed even if this administration stays.
Exactly.
So,
I would like to remind your Christian friends who are opposed to gay relationships because of the Bible that all that comes from Leviticus. You can't use Deuteronomy or Romans. You really can't use Romans, and Jesus never said a thing about gay people. And the same part of the Bible that says being gay is a sin also says that divorce is a sin, punishable by death, and that includes divorce and remarriage. It all falls under adultery. So what this means, if you really believe the part of the Bible that says being gay is a sin, then you technically owe it to God to kill Rush Limbaugh 3 times, which you really should not do.
But this is why the whole thing is ridiculous, and why journalists, when someone says, well, the Bible says, you know, you shouldn't be gay. The Bible says you should stone disobedient children. You know, the Bible says you shouldn't eat cheeseburgers. The Bible says a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
so,
it certainly does. And, you know, we're all, whatever your faith is, we all pick and choose the parts of our holy books to follow, and that's fine. We're human. But when you do it to put somebody in a box and be cruel to them, that's when we got to throw the book at you. That's what this show's about.
So let's take it back from that then, and remember that we are talking about real people and real lives, and damage is being done. People are not protected by laws that should be protecting them. And what can we do to make sure that changes? Part of what happens is that the hate speech goes out there, but people who are living their lives aren't allowed to live them as they would choose to do.
Yeah. You guys are all brilliant, and I feel like Ringo.
Can you rate us?
I'm just glad to be here. Yes, I can. We'll be right back with our final segment on The Point after this. Welcome back to The Point. I'm John Fugelsang, very happy to be here filling in. Now, last week saw, of course, the tragic death of singer Whitney Houston. Everyone's still reeling from it and trying to make sense of this unspeakable tragedy. I think most of us in this country were united in hoping that she would pull it together and have a great career resurgence and sing and perform and tour into her very old age. We don't yet know what happened to Ms. Houston. We hear a lot of rumors on TV news about it. We don't know what was the official cause of death. We don't know if it was narcotics or prescription drugs. We don't know what was in her system. The only thing we do know now is what exactly an artist has to do to get MTV to play videos again. But I don't want to politicize this, and in bringing the topic up, it's hard not to politicize it, but I do think that this is one of those very important issues where our conservative and progressive brothers and sisters can really find common ground. And Paul, I want to begin with you, because there's so many areas about Whitney Houston's death that I have not heard covered in the mainstream media. I hear a lot of gossip and innuendo. I don't hear a lot about the social ramifications of this tragedy. Everybody's gnashing their teeth over Whitney Houston's death after many years of her being a punchline. People calling her a crackhead and the salacious tabloid headlines. And it seems very often that Americans are addicted to addicts, or at least we're addicted to watching addicts screw up.
Yeah.
And it's this addict for entertainment behavior. I think A&E now needs to be called Addicts and Enablers.
Yeah.
So it seems like we want to really care and be empathetic. At the same time, we want to have this vulgar spectacle of amusement at this tragedy. Can a culture have it both ways?
Well, we do.
Yeah, but can that sustain?
I think one of the reasons, I think it's why people gossip. It's the easiest way in the world to get a sense that you've elevated yourself, is to bring other people down to your level. You know, it's a much easier way to feel better about yourself than to actually go out and help a poor person or, you know, pitch in at a local shelter. I'm a sober alcoholic and an addict, and I feel like I have maybe, I don't know if a unique insight, that sounds a little self-aggrandizing, but I could tell you this much, there is nothing you can do for an alcoholic or drug addict if they themselves don't want to get sober.
Absolutely. And we hear that in the media.
Yes.
Because you hear everyone say, oh, why were all of her friends around there?
You shouldn't blame, her death doesn't rest on those people. Did they enable her? Possibly, but she was going to get high no matter what anybody.
Somebody can put a camera down
did.
and help out, though, at some point, right?
Yes, possibly. They can't make her stop drinking or doing drugs, but what they can do is they can make sure they're not standing there while she's doing it.
Right.
And hope that if enough people do that, she says, wow, I've alienated a lot of people, maybe I need to change my life. Or not.
She never quite hit rock bottom.
But
Professor?
this begs the question. Having 70 stories about Whitney Houston on the news is sort of a debasement of our public life. There are serious issues of the economy, of the environment, of our political state that we need to be discussing, and instead we all get off on these, schadenfreude stories. And I don't know, when do we as a democracy say to ourselves, let's get real, folks, and think about what's important. It's terrible that this woman died, but truly and really, I don't know whether to blame ourselves as consumers or to look to the producers of the news and say, why are you doing this?
Well, I'm going to disagree with you, Professor, on a couple of grounds, and I'll tell you why. First off, I think most Americans feel like they know Whitney Houston better than they know most of their own relatives.
Do you?
I do. I think that this is someone that people really cared about, that a lot of people of my generation grew up with, and much like in the case of the O.J. trial, when we were hearing a lot of people saying, why is this such news? I felt, well, there's never been a celebrity of this magnitude accused of murder in our nation's history.
Absolutely.
And I think on a social level, I think that Whitney Houston's death is very relevant because now it's appearing, it's not confirmed yet, but that her death was not caused by narcotics, that her death may have likely been caused by completely legal, wholesome, socially acceptable, heavily advertised, taxable pharmaceutical drugs. And more Americans died of pharmaceutical drug overdoses in 2010 than died in automobile accidents. And in that sense, it speaks to our national character, it speaks to our whole pharma economy, and I do think that it is, to be fair to your point, a very socially relevant issue.
But the way you constructed it was very socially relevant because you were pulling out to the larger issues of
And that's why we're the point and not corporate news. Am I right?
Yes, yeah.
And that's why I wanted to talk about it, because when the producers, threw a dart and it hit my headshot and they let me host the show, I said I'd like to talk about Whitney, but only if we can talk about it in the context of issues that I think are underreported in the major news media. Rabbi, on a spiritual level, what's your take on this whole tragedy?
Well, I wonder what it says about society, and let's turn it to that. What does it say that our society is making life so difficult for whether someone is fabulously successful, as Whitney Houston was, or someone's struggling with a very difficult time and difficult life and no life support around them that makes them turn to drugs or makes them try to get pain relief from pharmaceuticals or just go to sleep, as some people say, all Michael Jackson wanted was to get some sleep.
Sure, but I'll also say that I don't really think that this is anything new in our culture. From the time that Bronze Age man first sucked the sap out of a poppy seed, up to Rush Limbaugh being busted for OxyContin, our culture's dependencies on opiates is well documented. And 100 years ago, at the dawn of the 20th century, 5% of bears' income came from heroin, which was originally marketed as a non-addictive children's cough medicine. Cocaine likewise was legal, and we know the 1800s was all about laudanum being sold to women to treat female issues. Mood-altering substances are as American as apple pie. And back in the colonial days, the biggest drug problem then was the same as the biggest drug problem now, which was alcohol. We have these other mood-altering substances, and this week Tony Bennett made a lot of headlines and caught a lot of flack for saying that he would like this to be an occasion to begin discussing the decriminalization of drugs. This was before we learned that Whitney Houston may have died from a prescription drug overdose, but I think it's really relevant because we can't watch television news without seeing tons and tons of commercials for mood-altering substances that are perfectly legal. And then we throw people in jail for using the ones that aren't on the legal list. So would you say on this level, Professor, that it does speak to a tremendous social relevance?
Yes. You've won me over.
Word. Paula.
And Paul, all honor to you for being willing to talk about it and to talk about it publicly. But,
Oh, he brings that out at parties all the time.
but you know, that's helpful to people.
It's incredibly helpful.
It's a service that you provide.
Well, that's very nice of you. You know, it strikes me the three topics that we're talking about. You know, people invoking religion to wrap themselves, to make themselves look less mean, homophobia, and us not being able to get enough of addicts. To me, speak to the greater problem in our society and really of the human condition, which is how do you feel that empty feeling that you have inside? Shop, sex, drugs, gossip, whatever it is that gets you off, you need to find a way to fill that hole in you. And the only thing I've ever found is spirituality. It's the only thing.
Which is a very distinct entity from religion in many cases.
Absolutely. It doesn't mean you necessarily believe in a God or a specific God, but
that there's more to it than just this.
There's more to it than just this, that there's something greater than yourself, and that to ultimately feel that to connect to that spiritual world, you can't enter it through the intellectual plane. You almost have to turn off your intellect to experience the spiritual plane. But once you've experienced it, you realize that there's more to life than stuff. And it seems less tempting to gossip. It becomes easy to not drink and do all these other things. But if you look at society's ills, almost all of them stem from us, myself included, trying to fill that hole that I don't have enough, I don't do enough, and I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And until you can find something that takes those three thoughts away, we're going to keep gossiping, we're going to keep invading other countries, we're going to keep doing, dangling these red meat issues and killing each other. When in reality, the way to calm it down is to love each other and say, how can I help you? What can I do?
Exactly. How can we help each other?
See, you said this has been going on since the Stone Age. I happen to think that was beautiful, what you said, but that it's been exacerbated by the crazy consumer capitalism we live in today.
Exactly.
So it may be an ongoing problem, the search for meaning, but when you are bombarded with messages that you will only feel better if you purchase more, and then you realize that and swallow it.
And on a related issue, to wrap it up, pertaining to materialism, the fact that Sony Music raised the prices on Whitney Houston CDs and downloads within hours of her death this weekend was the greatest advertisement for illegally downloading your music in history. We'll be right back with our final points right after this. Before we go, I just want to say something about Mitt Romney. It's easy to beat up on Governor Romney. I think we can all agree, and it's rather fun as well. Every time I look at him, I wonder, hey, how did Ward Cleaver manage to get pregnant by Satan? And it's also easy to make fun of the fact that, well, most of his party hates him. At the recent primary win, he actually walked away with, at the CPAC win, he walked away with 38% of the vote, which is awesome because now only 62% of his party hates him. And every time I watch Mitt Romney in a debate, I think, wow, if I could be that stiff for 90 minutes, I'd work in gay porn. But here's the thing. I'm going to defend Mitt Romney very briefly at the end of the show because he keeps getting called a flip-flopper. And I'm really sick of hearing my conservative brothers and sisters calling their presumptive nominee a flip-flopper, because Mitt Romney is anything but. Mitt Romney is a man who has always been willing to say, do, or believe anything to get elected. And in that, he has been completely consistent. The man has been a human windsock since day one, and he has not wavered. The GOP base, on the other hand, 7 frontrunners in only 5 months. That's right, 7 different people have been in the lead of this race. Everyone except John Huntsman, whose campaign was so sad Sarah McLachlan was going to do commercials for it. So really, when you think about it, who are the real flip-floppers here, Mitt Romney or the entire GOP voting base? Because I'm sorry, folks, but 7 frontrunners, and you want to call gay guys promiscuous? Please. I want to thank everyone here at The Point and the Young Turks for having me on. I want to thank these wonderful panelists, USC Media and Religion professor Diane Winston. She is the author of Small Screen, Big Picture, Television and Lived Religion, and you can learn more about her and her brilliant work at uscmediareligion.org. Rabbi Lisa Edwards of the Beth Chayim Chadashim Synagogue, the first all lesbian and gay founded synagogue in the world. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And of course, the brilliant and hilarious Paul Gilmartin, who you can follow at paulgilmartin.com, and his show is the Mental Illness Happy Hour. I also want to thank our point contributors, Gary Kamiya from salon.com and Dave Holmes. Check his stuff out at www.daveholmes.tv. Again, my name is John Fugelsang, and you can follow me at johnfugelsang.com or at twitter.com/John Fugelsang, but that means you have to know how to spell the word Fugelsang. I'm also 1/3 of Stephanie Miller's Sexy Liberal Comedy Tour. Our album is the first live political comedy album to go to #1 on the Amazon, iTunes, and Billboard comedy charts, so I hope you'll check out what we do. It's a real pleasure to be here. I want to thank this brilliant panel. Everyone here is part of the Young Turks, and most of all, I want to thank you for watching this, for supporting independent news, and for doing the Lord's work. Keep it real. We'll see you next time.